Welcome back, and I'm Alfred Lambermont Weber with TRUETUBE.CO, and it's a great pleasure to be able to introduce the spokesperson with the line, Tony Joseph Hamlin, coming from Toronto, Canada, holding and making a press statement on the project of the line, working with police. The line is a leaderless movement that is about people uniting to end oppression. The line will be hosting a rally on August 20th, 2020 at 6 p.m. Central Time at the Legislative Building in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and has been holding and will be holding at this time rallies throughout nationwide throughout Canada. Has held rallies in Montreal. Will be holding a major national rally in Ottawa at the nation's capital on August 29th. The line, along with First Nations community, have reached out to police and asked First Nations to lead all communities in Canada in talks about different communities, organizations, and police working together. They will be letting the government know that they need more funding for their police and police services through their speakers. And so it's a great pleasure to present their spokesperson, Tony Joseph Hamlin. Tony, over to you.
Mr. Weber, first of all, thank you for having me here on the show with you. It's very much appreciated, and for the introduction and the welcoming message. You're right, we are talking about specifically the event that we are hosting in Manitoba in regards to policing and First Nations communities. You have pretty much outlined it pretty well. As you've mentioned, we've been doing these protests in regards to oppression and different mandates by the government that have been trampling over Canadians' rights and freedoms, all the way from BC to PEI. However, there's been lots of recent protests from different groups that have been, requesting to, defund the police type of movements, which we do not agree with. We support our police services, our men and women in law enforcement. We value what they do, and we realize there's a need to actually increase the type of funding they get for certain services that they offer. Specifically, we're doing this in Manitoba, and I'm sure it'll leak over to other provinces. But we just needed to start somewhere, just to draw attention about the lack of certain training that police may have, and resources that they need to be able to work with the community. Manitoba has some high numbers when it comes specifically to missing women and children, specifically First Nations, in First Nations communities. Perhaps investigations were not done properly. So what we're calling for is increased funding to be put towards specialized training, resources to aid in these topics. So what we're hosting is an event that's being hosted by the First Nations communities and the Line Manitoba, in unison with the Winnipeg Police Services, to bring attention to these topics.
Very good. Now, it looks like we've been joined by some of your colleagues at the line, specifically Rob Slater, Elder Ernie Daniels, and Rose Jazmin. Would you like to introduce your colleagues and see what they would like to say?
Yes, for sure. I mean, I can speak on behalf of the movement in general, as a Canada-wide movement, where we've been actively trying to get the Canadian people involved. But these gentlemen and the fine lady that you have that just joined the chat are very well versed in regards to the issues in Manitoba, in regards to the policing and First Nations communities, and they would definitely be able to speak very well in regards to these topics. Maybe they can introduce themselves and go from there.
Hi there, I'm Rob Slater, Treaty 1 Territory here in Manitoba. I want to thank the line for having me on today. good, right? I would like to speak on missing murdered people here in Canada. Certainly, I have grave concerns about crime scene investigations, as I already mentioned, and these issues are underfunded by the federal government. I know the federal pocket goes down to the province and there's benefits of government here in Manitoba. My biggest concern is a lot of crime scenes are not properly analyzed, not properly taken care of, and these people get away with these horrific crimes to not only First Nation people but all Canadians. And I would like to see the federal government come and give us programs, or we can develop programs, but we need money to fund those programs. And other things like I would like to mention is we will work closely with police on these issues. I know the police have a big agenda, and we would certainly help with that, with training to our First Nation people and other people that are involved. And I'd like to pass you over to Elder Ernie Daniels here from Hamlin.
Tanji, bonjour, Anin, Washte. My name is Ernie Daniels, the former chief of Long Plain First Nation. Now I'm a knowledge keeper and elder for Treaty 1 people, as well as I sit on the National Council of Elders, Knowledge Keepers in Ottawa, Assembly First Nation, and I also work with the Assembly First Nations here in Manitoba, advisor to the Regional Chief Kevin Hart. First of all, I want to thank you for having me on this event here today. Tomorrow, I'm attending a function as an elder because I was asked by the chiefs of my area to attend this function because the Minister of Justice is addressing the funding issue of First Nation police force in Manitoba. So I don't know what he's going to say. We'll find out tomorrow what he has to say. But for me personally, I became chief back in 78, 79. Throughout the 80s, I was chief of my community. I was chairman of the together.We Tribal Council. During that time, we set up our police force. It's called the together.We Police Services, called DOPS. It has now changed to a Manitoba First Nation Police Force. When we started that police force back in 78, 79, and as a functional police force made up mainly of our Indigenous people. At the same time, we set up the first child and family services in Canada because our kids were being taken away, and we put a stop to our kids being shipped down the states and all over the world in terms of adoption and foster care. So we set up our two things over the years, our police services and child and family services. But since that time, my friends, there has been some major missions. Royal Commission of Aboriginal People. There has been the National Reconciliation Commission that just happened about 4 or 5 years ago, and also AGI, Aboriginal Justice Inquiry, as a result of one police force, a policeman killing one of our chiefs in Manitoba at that time. So it's called AGI. So there have been a lot of recommendations, my friends, throughout those years on the whole question of justice and correction and policing. But this day, my friends, this day, hear me out. Why our police forces, Indigenous police, are not being funded properly? Because the federal government, who pays 52% funding to our First Nation police force, and 48% is paid by the province, each province. But both governments very clearly states to this day as a policy, First Nations Indigenous Police Service is not an essential services. The RCMP, the municipal forces, the provincial police forces, they're all recognized as essential services, but not ours. That's why we don't get proper funding. That's why we don't have resources to explore investigations like my friend here, Mr. Slater, has stated about the missing inquiry. I personally have a nephew missing 5 years already, missing. I think he's gone, but I hope he's not. But I feel what's happening with this missing inquiry. I totally support what they're doing, and I'm sure I'll be attending the rally in Winnipeg on Thursday. But anyway, I just want to say those things to you that, you know, under the human rights legislation, our police forces across Canada should be recognized by the federal government, provincial government as an essential services, so they get proper funding. And I think for me, as a former chief and as an elder, I think that's a discriminatory policy by the federal government and provincial governments on human rights legislation in terms of not recognizing our police force as essential services. Thank you, Miigwech.
Thank you, Elder.
Thank you, Elder.
Thank you.
Rose Jazmin, do you want to say something?
I just wanted to mention that the rally is being held on Thursday, August 20th at the Legislative Building in Winnipeg, Manitoba at 6 p.m. So we're trying to get as many people out as possible, and hopefully through your show, we'll get lots of people in Manitoba to come out on that day.
Very good. And
Any questions? Both of you gentlemen have any questions to Mr. Slater and myself?
yes, well, you know, here our member of parliament here in this riding, our federal member of parliament actually is a hereditary chief. She is quite well known. She had a confrontation with the prime minister, unfortunately, and she stood her ground, and we think that it was very unfortunate that the prime minister saw fit to throw her out of the federal party. She was the first Aboriginal Minister of Justice in Canadian history. And I think that she would have gone a long way toward recognizing Aboriginal police forces as essential services. Now, have you thought of contacting her in connection with this? She is our member of parliament. We're in her riding here in British Columbia, and she is quite an extraordinary person. She is a hereditary chief, and her father has been active as well. And so we would like to ask you whether you would like to contact her office to start becoming, she has a national profile, and to enlist her services at the national level, because we think that she was unjustly divested of her office as the first Aboriginal Minister of Justice, federal Minister of Justice, that would have had oversight over the issues that you have just raised, Elder.
Yeah, I know her, and I know her dad well. I worked with her dad, Bill, for many years at Assembly First Nation, and I'm aware of the situation she was under. I saw a document prior to her being thrown under the bus. In that document, she wanted to introduce to the House, to the Parliament, for a major reform on corrections, policing, and justice. And somehow the powers to be within Privy Council and the bureaucrats, I think they had an influence on the Prime Minister, because they were scared of that document that she was going to introduce for a major reform of the relationship between Crown and our First Nations, because we do have a treaty, remember? We did sign an agreement, a contract or a treaty with the Crown, and nowhere it states that we gave up our sovereignty to the Crown. But you know, I think that's where she's coming from, and I think the federal government and the powers to be are very scared of that document, and that's why our treaties are not being properly recognized. Yet I must remind you, Mr. Slater stated, him and I come from Treaty 1. Next year is 150 years anniversary of Treaty 1 next year. We are calling upon the Crown and the federal government to make some major concessions towards recognizing the provisions and promises of treaty, which were never fulfilled. You know, once they signed Treaty 11, signed the last number treaty, Alzheimer's kicked in. They forgot about it. And they forgot all about our treaties. Once they got the land and the resources, then they forgot about us. They've marginalized us for 150 years, still are. So next year, we're going to make a major effort. The world international community that we do have our treaties, and ours is 150 years old next year. We're going to make sure the world knows about it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you know, just as a follow-up question, because you're familiar with these parties, and this is really a federal question. We just had the announcement at this critical time that Parliament was prologued, and there's no basis for prologuing Parliament. I mean, we have the legislatures of great countries surrounding us, like the countries to the south, countries in Europe, the British Parliament. They're all continuing. There is no reason to prologue Parliament here. I mean, that is an extraordinary step, so that issues like the one that you're talking about. So isn't it time that you begin to join forces like with the MP here in our riding and bring like these concrete issues, like the issues of Aboriginal policing, that can join with other same community policing issues throughout Canada, and come and join, even bring the issue of a snap election. I mean, if these forces are going to say, oh, it's time for a snap, for a proroguing Parliament. No, it's time for a snap election. What do you think about those issues? That it might be time for a snap election now.
I understand what you're saying. For me and Mr. Slater here, we got to watch what we say, because we have to recognize our chiefs that are elected by our people as leaders, and we don't want to undermine what they're saying. And there's our lobby group, and there's Assembly First Nations. Each province has their own organization to speak on behalf of us. It's up to them to carry that mantle, what you're talking about. But Mr. Slade and I can raise those issues in the public and as an awareness thing, but it's up to our chiefs to carry that through, because I used to be a chief. I'm not a chief anymore. But, you know, I expect my chief to fight for me what you're talking about, you know, what Canada's doing, like proroguing for Parliament.
Yeah. Well, Elder and Elder Ernie Daniels and Rob Slater and Rose Jazmin, thank you very much for having participated here, and we
welcome.
Encourage,
Thank you, Alfred.
Thank you. Tony, do you want to comment on any of these questions and perhaps remind people how they can participate in these activities, and also in Ottawa coming up on August 29th?
Right.
Well, for me, I like to promote the.
I'll let Joseph, Tony Joseph.
Yeah. Well, first, I'd just like to say that we're glad to be a part of this and to be able to help with all forms of oppression towards any of the Canadian people, specifically this issue, which has been going on for a very long time in the First Nations communities. It's definitely something that we are very, very emotional about when there's any forms of oppression towards any human being. All these protests that we've been hosting, Manitoba and Winnipeg, BC, Ottawa, they're all part of a bigger movement that encompasses a number of civil liberties groups Canada-wide that have all merged. And all of our combined efforts have been leading up to a final stage. So on the 29th of August, we will all be peacefully protesting down at the Parliament Hill. And we will have an access of 200,000 people in attendance. So anybody, throughout our network, all the protests that we've been doing to raise awareness towards all these topics, whether it's trafficking or missing women's children or all these other tyrannical orders, everybody will be converging down in Ottawa on the 29th of August. And if anybody wants to get involved with any of our communities, provinces, the protests, please check us out on the website, and it'll divert them to a specific group in their province. The website is thelinecanada.com. And once you're there, you can filter your way to a specific province from there. But August 29th will be definitely a major event. And from there, we'll be pronouncing another event, which we are definitely aiming to have at least 500,000 people in attendance. We can affect change in this country.
Good.
Well, thank you very much then. Tony Joseph Hamlin, on behalf of the Line Canada, and we want to thank Elder Ernie Daniels and Rob Slater, and of course, Rose Jazmin for having coordinated. This is Alfred Weber for TRUETUBE.co, and you can find out further information about this important movement and these developments that are happening throughout Canada at thelinecanada.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.